This is slide 1 of our Cold War and the 1950s unit. To talk about the Cold War, we need to go back earlier in the 50s, right really to the end of World War II, where we see the United States and the Soviet Union at odds with one another. Really, we were at odds with one another during the war as well, but essentially we just had a common enemy. The only thing the United States and the Soviet Union had in common was that Germany was our enemy. And as soon as that common enemy was eliminated, we became each other's enemy. Stalin never really trusted the United States anyway. During the war, he thought that the delay to open a second front in Europe was purposeful so that the Soviet Union would suffer more. And then when he found out we'd been developing an atomic bomb without notifying him, our ally, it led to even more distrust. And then, as soon as the war ended, the United States stopped sending Lend-Lease supplies to the Soviet Union. So Stalin might have a pretty good argument here that we weren't all that great of an ally to them. When the war was over, Stalin was determined that he was going to have a whole series of friendly governments along his western border. So over here, you see, there's the Soviet Union, and then he was determined that these countries, and specifically Poland right here, would be a communist country. That if another war was fought between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, it would be fought here in these other communist countries, not in the Soviet Union proper. So countries like Poland and Czechoslovakia and Romania and all of these here. So that goes against Roosevelt's vision of a free democratic world. So basically, as soon as World War II is over, you're going to have these two sides dividing up and lining up against each other. Okay? Now, this standoff between these two opposing political views comes to be known as the Cold War. Okay? And it is called the Cold War because really there are only a few instances where it actually heats up into fighting. It'll go on for 45 years, but only a couple of instances does fighting actually break out. Really, it's a war of ideologies, a war of two different political views. Communism in Eastern Europe and democracy and capitalism in Western Europe. Right? So that's the Cold War, and sort of set the stage here. Right? Now, the dividing line, this white line you see right here, okay, the dividing line between communist East Europe and democratic capitalist Western Europe is this white line. And that white line is known as the Iron Curtain. It is Winston Churchill, actually, British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, who comes up with that name. He's giving a speech in which he says that an Iron Curtain has been drawn across the continent of Europe. Right? So all the countries sort of west of this line here, right, except Yugoslavia right there. That's the one different one there. Yugoslavia and Albania, but that's not a big deal. Yugoslavia is a big deal. All the countries west of that line will be free, democratic, capitalist countries, including up here in Northern Europe. So you really could, the white line could go all the way up there. All the countries east of that line would be communist. Okay? So that line, the Iron Curtain, becomes the dividing line between communist Eastern Europe and democratic Western Europe. Now, we learn our lesson after World War I. If you'll recall, one of Woodrow Wilson's biggest goals, his primary goal in fact, was to establish a League of Nations, which would eventually fail because mainly the United States doesn't join. So we're going to set up another international peacekeeping body called the United Nations. And this time, the United States will join. In fact, it will be based in the United States. The UN is based in New York City. Okay. Now, the UN has two separate bodies that you need to know. Okay. The smaller, but probably more important one, is called the Security Council. The Security Council. And the Security Council has 5 permanent members. They can't be taken off. Right? 5 permanent members of the Security Council. And you're going to need to know these, so write them down. The United States, okay, Britain, France, China, and the Soviet Union. Nowadays it's Russia, but when it's founded it's the Soviet Union. Okay? And this is right after World War II. The UN's founded in 1945, right at the end of the war. So again, 5-member Security Council, 5 permanent members. U.S., Britain, France, China, and the Soviet Union, the USSR. And one of the biggest, most important deals here about the Security Council is that they have veto power. No action can be taken against any of those countries without their approval. So the Security Council can't decide to do something to France without France approving it. Right? So they have veto power, very important power. Okay? The second, the much larger body of the United Nations, is called the General Assembly. And the General Assembly is all the other countries in the UN. So if you're not on the Security Council, you're in the General Assembly. Okay? So 2 parts of the United Nations. Okay? Now, one of the first things the United Nations will do is run the Nuremberg Trials. Okay? The Nuremberg Trials are a whole series of trials at the end of the war held to decide what's going to happen to the leaders of Germany. The military leaders, the civilian leaders, and specifically the concentration camp leaders. It is significant that it is held in Nuremberg. It's not a real big city in Germany, but it is in Germany because Nuremberg was the birthplace of the Nazi Party. Okay? And when the Nuremberg is selected for these trials, it's very symbolic because we're going to once and for all put an end to the Nazi Party where it began. Okay? And the leaders of of Germany here, the Nazi Party, are either sentenced to death or very long prison terms. Okay? Now, lastly, Germany will get divided at the end of the war. Okay? So you need to look at the map here at the bottom of the page here. Okay? This whole colored area, the red, the green, the blue, the orange, okay, that used to be Germany. Okay? There's France over here, here's Poland over here, here are all the little former countries that become part of the Soviet Union. But here's Germany, the colored areas, the red, the green, the blue, and the orange. Okay? Germany gets divided into 4 military occupation zones. Soviet Union controls the red, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, controls green, the United States blue, and France orange, okay? As you see there. Okay? The red will become, eventually, communist East Germany. Okay? And the green, blue, and orange here will become free democratic West Germany. Right? So eventually, you'll end up with two countries. Communist East Germany in red and free democratic West Germany in blue, green, and orange. It's because Stalin wasn't willing to give up on Germany. He wanted part of it. He wanted to punish Germany for all it was worth. The United States, Britain, and France realized that we need a rebuilt Germany as part of a rebuilt Europe. Right? So we're not willing to give up on Germany either. So what do? You divide it into 4 parts, and you end up with 2 countries. Now, within, if you notice here, the little yellow dot, right in the middle of communist East Germany, you have the city of Berlin. Right? And Berlin will get divided. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. But Berlin will get divided just like Germany did. Berlin gets divided into 4 parts. A communist East Berlin and a free democratic West Berlin. And we refuse to give up on West Berlin, even though it's in the middle of communist East Germany. So what you end up with is this little island of democracy right in the middle of a whole country of communism. But we'll talk more about that later on. To finish up, you need to understand what satellite states are. Okay? Think of it this way. A satellite is something that orbits something else. So the moon is a satellite of Earth. Earth is a satellite of the sun. It's something that orbits something else. Satellite states are all these little communist states there in Eastern Europe. So all these little communist states here, Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, all of those become satellite states of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is the biggest, the most powerful of them. They will all sort of revolve around the Soviet Union. They will do everything the Soviet Union tells them to do. And right now what they're doing is providing a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and Western Europe. Okay, that's it for slide 1.